Hello, Emma, and welcome back to the show. We've got a fantastic episode lined up today, focusing not just on what to study, but how to transform your mindset to achieve true English fluency.
I am thrilled to dive into this, Liam. We title this The Breakthrough Blueprint because so many of our listeners feel like they are perpetually stuck in that intermediate plateau. They have the vocabulary, they understand grammar rules, but they lack the confidence and the seamlessness of expression. They're looking for a genuine paradigm shift.
Exactly, we're moving beyond just memorization. Today, we're discussing the psychological hacks and the practical daily habits used by people who master complex skills quickly. This is about building an identity, not just acquiring a skill. And, as always, we'll be delivering this conversation at a natural pace, embedding advanced vocabulary so you get accustomed to high-level English for expressing complex ideas and emotions.
Let's start with the elephant in the room. Why do people stagnate? In my experience, Liam, it's often cognitive dissonance. They want fluency, but their actions are misaligned. They rely on passive consumption, watching films with subtitles, but they recoil from active production, which is where the real neural restructuring happens.
That recoil is usually rooted in one thing, the fear of imperfection, or what we often call debilitating perfectionism. When you learn a language, you are essentially learning to fail gracefully in public hundreds of times a day. If you measure success by speaking perfectly, you've set yourself up for immediate and profound frustration.
That's where the first psychological hack comes in, and it's the cornerstone of the blueprint. The shift from outcome orientation to process orientation. Stop obsessing over the perfect accent or the exact day you'll be fluent. Instead, fall in love with the daily process. The small victory of articulating a difficult thought, even if you stumble over a preposition.
It sounds simple, Emma, but it's transformative. Think about this. The outcome is external and uncontrollable. The process is internal and completely within your domain of influence. If you successfully complete your 20 minutes of deliberate practice today, you have succeeded. Full stop. This hack combats that feeling of languishing that hits intermediate learners.
And let's pair that with the second crucial hack, identity-based learning. This is a concept popularized by James Clear, and it is immensely powerful for language learning. Liam, instead of saying, "I am trying to learn English," you need to fundamentally shift your internal narrative to, "I am an English speaker."
That distinction is subtle, but the subconscious implications are enormous. When you identify as an English speaker, your motivation becomes intrinsic. When faced with a challenging conversation, you don't think, "This is hard work I have to do." You think, "How would an English speaker handle this situation?" It changes your default behavior.
It certainly does. It means embracing the identity. An English speaker watches English media. An English speaker seeks out native English conversation partners. And critically, an English speaker uses the language, even when it feels awkward or inconvenient.
And for our listeners, let's talk about how to actually implement this identity shift. It's not just magical thinking. It requires evidence. You need to gather small proofs every single day that support the identity. For example, if you decide one of your identity traits is, "I am a curious English conversationalist," then today, you must proactively ask 2 follow-up questions in English during your chat practice.
Exactly. You are building self-efficacy, which is the belief in your ability to succeed in specific situations. Every small proof reinforces the idea, eroding that persistent self-doubt or imposter syndrome that often afflicts advanced learners.
Let's transition now to the daily habits. The physical manifestation of this blueprint, Emma. The psychological hacks provide the fuel, but the habits are the engine. We need to talk about the power of micro-habits and consistency.
Consistency trumps intensity every single time, Liam. Many people try to sit down for 4 hours on a Saturday and cram. That high-intensity, infrequent approach is rarely sustainable and often leads to burnout and cognitive fatigue. The breakthrough blueprint relies on the compounding effect of small, non-negotiable daily habits.
We strongly advocate for the 20-minute immersion block. This is your daily, meticulous, and deliberate practice session. It's short enough that you can't say you don't have the time, and it's long enough to achieve neurological depth. What matters is the fidelity of the commitment.
And what does that 20 minutes entail? It must be active, not passive. It could be shadowing a complex piece of dialogue, trying to mimic the intonation and speed of a native speaker. It could be free writing about a complex emotional experience, forcing you to reach for vocabulary that conveys nuance, which is vital for advanced expression.
That's a key point, Emma, reaching for the nuanced vocabulary. When you are describing something abstract, like melancholy or serendipity, you are pushing the boundaries of your linguistic capabilities. You are moving from merely communicating meaning to communicating feeling and subtlety.
Let's talk about the environment, which is often an overlooked factor in habit formation. If your goal is to make English a daily habit, you must redesign your environment to make the desired behavior easy and the undesirable behavior difficult. This is called environmental design.
Give us an example, Emma. How can a learner redesign their environment for English fluency?
Certainly, Liam. If your 20-minute block involves reviewing flashcards of advanced phrasal verbs, you shouldn't have to search for those flashcards. They should be placed right next to your coffee maker or anchored to an existing daily routine. You create an environmental trigger. When you finish pouring your coffee, the flashcards are unavoidable. This eliminates the need for relying on willpower, which is a finite resource.
And on the flip side, we have to eliminate or reduce the friction involved in undesirable behavior. If you habitually resort to watching native media with subtitles in your own language, make that process difficult. Hide the remote, change the default settings, or better yet, shift to English subtitles to keep your brain actively processing the language in context.
We must address the psychological hurdle of starting, Liam. This is where many people fail. The concept of getting started feels like a monolithic task. The psychological hack here is the 2-minute rule. Every new habit should be reducible to a 2-minute version.
I love the 2-minute rule because it defeats the inertia. The goal is not to achieve the outcome in 2 minutes, but simply to cross the starting threshold. If your habit is read a chapter of an English novel, the 2-minute version is read the first sentence. If your habit is practice speaking for 20 minutes, the 2-minute version is open the language exchange app.
The magic, Liam, is that once you've invested those 2 minutes, your brain hates to stop. The cognitive load required to continue is far less than the cognitive load required to start. It's an effective mechanism for continuous momentum.
Now, let's integrate these hacks with our goal of advancing fluency and expanding vocabulary. For complex emotional expression, many learners know the word happy or sad, but advanced fluency requires emotional granularity. We need words that convey intensity, duration, and nuance.
This is essential for moving from transactional English to truly connective, articulate English. For instance, if you want to express sadness, you shouldn't just stop at "I'm sad." You can use words like disconsolate if the sadness is profound and unrelieved, or crestfallen if it relates to acute disappointment after an expectation wasn't met.
That's a fantastic distinction, Emma. Let's practice integrating this. Say you are trying to articulate the feeling of intense nostalgia mixed with a little melancholy. How would we use advanced phrasing to convey that complexity?
We might describe it as a poignant yearning for an earlier, simpler time. The word poignant itself conveys a deeply moving, often sorrowful sense of emotion. It's a word that adds texture to the feeling. Using vocabulary like poignant elevates the entire conversation, making your expression nuanced and sophisticated.
Another crucial area is expressing complex cognitive states or disagreements. Instead of saying, "I disagree strongly," which is functional but basic, we can use phrases that convey intellectual opposition or skepticism.
Precisely. You might say, "I have profound reservations about that premise," or "I must respectfully push back against that assertion." Or, if you suspect the argument is flawed but can't immediately pinpoint why, you could state, I find the logical underpinning of that argument tenuous. Tenuous meaning weak or flimsy.
That moves us away from personal conflict and into intellectual discourse, which is where truly advanced English shines. This requires deliberate practice, and this is where the daily habit of reflective journaling comes in. Emma?
Absolutely. Journaling in English is not about grammar practice. It's about forcing your brain to articulate complex, messy thoughts. If you had an argument or a difficult decision today, don't just summarize it. Write about the emotional fallout, the internal deliberation, the ambivalence you felt.
When you try to write about ambivalence, the simultaneous presence of opposing emotional attitudes, you naturally search for words like dichotomy, internal conflict, or irresolute. This practice forces you out of your comfort zone and expands your active, expressive vocabulary rather than just your passive recognition vocabulary.
And let's emphasize the role of metacognition in this blueprint, Liam. Metacognition is thinking about thinking. Successful learners don't just study. They analyze how they study and how they learn.
So, after your 20-minute practice session, you don't just close the book. You take 1 minute for reflection. You ask, what did I struggle with today? Was it pronouncing the sound? Was it formulating the conditional tense? Was it simply finding the appropriate idiom to convey my sarcasm?
By identifying this specific, granular weakness, you remove the generalized, overwhelming feeling of inadequacy. You transition from, I am bad at English, to, I need to work on my proficiency with verb. Compliments. This targeted approach is the essence of deliberate practice.
That targeted practice then feeds back into our identity hack. When you successfully address a specific weakness, you reinforce the identity. I am an English speaker who actively manages and improves my linguistic deficiencies. It's a self-reinforcing upward spiral.
Now, Liam, a word about the concept of input saturation. Many learners believe they need to constantly consume new material. However, the psychological breakthrough often happens not through consuming new material, but through the rigorous repetition of high-quality input until it becomes automatic.
That's the concept of overlearning. It means practicing a skill past the point of mastery so that it becomes second nature and requires minimal cognitive bandwidth. Think of the advanced phrases and vocabulary we are using today. They shouldn't require conscious effort to retrieve, they should be instantly accessible.
For example, if you encounter a highly effective phrase, such as to navigate complex geopolitical waters, don't just note it down. Practice using it in 5 different, slightly varied sentences until the structure and rhythm feel innate. You are literally building muscle memory for complex linguistic structures.
And this leads us to the final, indispensable psychological hack, radical self-compassion, particularly concerning mistakes. We established that failure is inevitable, but how you process that failure determines your success trajectory.
If you treat every mistake as a personal failing, you induce stress, which shuts down the prefrontal cortex, the exact part of your brain responsible for complex thinking and verbal fluency. Stress impedes learning.
Instead, we must reframe failure. This is cognitive reframing. A mistake is not evidence of inadequacy, it is evidence of effort and a valuable diagnostic tool. You must maintain the detachment of a scientist observing a phenomenon. Interesting, I used the present perfect when I should have used the simple past. Let's isolate that and rectify the hypothesis.
Adopt the growth mindset. Every single misstep is simply feedback. If you can cultivate that resilient outlook, your fear of speaking will diminish substantially. When you stop worrying about making mistakes, you free up cognitive resources to focus on conveying your intent, your nuanced ideas, and your complex emotions.
This shift is crucial for speaking speed. When you are less preoccupied with censoring every word for perfection, your articulation speed naturally accelerates. Your speech becomes smoother, less hesitant, and more authentic. This is how you bridge the gap between knowing English and speaking English fluently.
And let's not forget the importance of rhythm and prosody, Liam. Advanced fluency isn't just about vocabulary. It's about sounding natural. That means practicing the flow, the stress, and the intonation of native speakers. This is often the differentiator between someone who studied English academically and someone who truly communicates seamlessly.
That's why we always recommend shadowing. Find clips of speeches, podcasts, or films where the speaker is articulating complex ideas with excellent rhythm. Listen, transcribe, and then speak simultaneously, focusing purely on matching the cadence and emotional tone. This improves your ability to convey gravity or levity, depending on the subject matter.
To convey gravity, meaning seriousness or significance, you need a lower pitch, slower tempo, and deliberate articulation. To convey levity, lightness, or humor, the opposite applies. Mastering this nonverbal layer of communication is vital for advanced interaction.
So, to summarize the breakthrough blueprint for our listeners, it starts with a psychological shift. First, adopt the identity-based mindset. You are already an English speaker. Second, transition from outcome orientation to process orientation. Success is simply completing your daily practice.
Third, implement the daily habits using the 2-minute rule and the 20-minute. Immersion Block. Design your environment to make practice inevitable. Fourth, engage in deliberate practice by using metacognition to analyze your specific deficiencies, not your general incompetence.
And finally, cultivate radical self-compassion and cognitive reframing. Mistakes are data points, not defects. Use reflective journaling to force the articulation of complex, nuanced emotional states, broadening your expressive range beyond basic vocabulary.
This blueprint is designed to take the guesswork out of learning. It's not just motivation, it's a system. And the beautiful thing, Liam, is that once these habits are anchored, the momentum becomes self-sustaining. The compounding effect takes over, and that plateau you felt perpetually stuck on begins to recede rapidly.
It truly does. It's about building a robust, resilient system that handles the inevitable setbacks of skill acquisition. Emma, this has been an incredibly thorough exploration of the psychology behind fluency. For everyone listening, start small today. Find one 2-minute habit, anchor it to your current routine, and commit to maintaining that small habit every day for the next week.
Take that first step. Gather the evidence that you are indeed an English speaker and watch the momentum build. Thank you so much, Liam, for this insightful discussion. I hope our listeners feel ready to implement this blueprint immediately.
My pleasure, Emma, and to all our dedicated learners, thank you for tuning in. We look forward to helping you navigate the complex but rewarding path to our true English fluency in our next episode. Until then, keep practicing deliberately and embrace the process.
Goodbye, everyone.